Welcome back to the unofficial Squarespace Entrepreneur Podcast. My name is Omari Harriban, and if this is your first time listening, this show is all about building a business on Squarespace, especially businesses that serve the users of Squarespace. So if that sounds like you, then you're in the right place. Today I'm talking with Ryan Waczek, of the founder of the Indie Music Academy. I first met Ryan years ago when he had a Squarespace website. I'm not sure if he still does, but uh, during that time, he was building or getting ready to build the Indie Music Academy, and we did a lot of work on SEO around his brand and what he was trying to accomplish at the time. And since then, he's gone on to do some really amazing things with the Indie Music Academy, and I've kind of just watched as a fan, and I follow along on his email list, and it's always inspiring to me. And so I wanted to invite Ryan on the show to kind of just catch up with him and learn from him as well, learn from his experiences growing his education business. And yeah, so let's get into it.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me, Amari. And to flip this around on you, I've learned so much from you, and it's really impacted my life and my business. And so I just want to take a moment to say thank you and just let you know that you were a very important step in building the Indie Music Academy. So I just want to make sure that you know that.
Appreciate that, man. That's really cool. So if you wouldn't mind, just like telling the audience a little bit about who you are and what you've done so far.
Absolutely, yeah. So I'm a musician. I went to music school, got my degree in classical music. But after I graduated, I realized pretty much the hard way that I was missing an entire skill set if I wanted to get my music out there, if I wanted to reach new audiences, build a fan base. Not once in my classical music degree did they ever talk about marketing at all.
Hmm.
And sometimes I kick myself, why didn't I just like get that communications degree or that business degree or whatever it is? But I chose classical drums, which has been useful in certain times. But after graduating, I ended up just working at Starbucks as a barista. And it wasn't until I got a pretty lucky break, this is where our connection comes in, Omari, but pretty lucky break. A guy at my church was like, "Hey, I need someone to help me build my Squarespace website."
Mm.
And so what that started, unbeknownst to me, is I was basically hired onto his team. It was a small startup. It was an e-commerce shoe company, and they were running everything off of Squarespace. And that's when I met you because I was trying to turn this Squarespace website into something so much more. That's where your plugins came in. I used a ton of them, and it really leveled up the product pages that we were trying to build for the shoes. Um, but to continue with my story, in that experience, I got an entire marketing education, and it went from of course, website building, but to copywriting, to search engine optimization, even mailing lists to direct advertising using meta ads and stuff like that. So, when you're in a startup environment, you wear lots of hats, and that's where it wasn't planned at all, but that's where I pretty much filled in that gap. And I started thinking, what if I applied all of this to music, right? Because that's my true background. That's what I got my formal education in. And so I started blogging and making YouTube videos, marrying those two topics that I was now pretty much equally passionate about. I loved marketing, loved everything that had to do with finding an audience. And that's so pivotal for musicians because that's the whole game. It's like, how do I get my songs to reach brand new ears?
Hmm.
And so that's how the Indie Music Academy is born, marrying my two very different, I guess, experiences, the two pivotal moments of education in my life, combining it into something that I feel that independent musicians really need.
Wow. Yeah, that's amazing because I do remember that shoe brand because
Yeah.
I used to like highlight it as a great example of how to use some of the plugins. Um
Awesome.
um so like this is the part where I think I've always followed along because as a musician myself, I always saw my marketing education as a means to figure out how to apply this to like the things I'm passionate about, which one of those things has always been music. So I've always been really interested with how people go about solving that problem. And so I think you've come up with some, unique ways to solve those problems via the Indie Music Academy. How Talk to me a little bit about that transition from, working with a shoe startup to creating your own education business.
Totally. The transition was defined by this other company that I was running briefly. It was an artist development label. So I took my, music degree, that included like a little bit of production and mixing and mastering. And so I basically found these artists in San Diego where I lived at the time. And I started this label that was really focused on taking an artist from 0 to 1.
Hmm.
And it was pretty holistic. Like we would record them, take photos, um, you know, uh, shows around town, everything that had to do with kind of creating that first package, right? What are we going to take to fans?
Hmm.
And so this was before Indie Music Academy even existed. This was basically my like boots on the ground, like workshop phase where I was really like testing out my theories on content creation, on just branding and imagery. This is where a lot of things developed and made it into some early YouTube videos. And a lot of those ideas really focused on Spotify and how Spotify fits into the broader marketing plan with your music because Spotify is a very, I'd say it's not mysterious because people know what it is, but it's a very tricky platform. And it's very tricky to put the right amount of weight behind it. Sometimes it's overemphasized, and other times it's really underemphasized, where artists completely shun it away and they kind of take that early Taylor Swift approach where it's like, I'm not going to put my music on streaming. I'm just going to sell it directly because a stream is, it pays such a little royalty and the music industry is out to get me, and this kind of whole narrative that shuns Spotify away. But I'd say that that transition time really clarified a couple things in my mind. It's that the most important thing that a musician can do is focus on audience growth and nurture. That became very clear to me because almost everything grinds to a halt when you don't have that audience interaction to fuel you as a creative, right?
Mm,
Because we all get exhausted, kind of just throwing things against, you know, basically into a silent room. It doesn't feel good as a creative person, I think.
yeah.
And the other element is that your income is directly tied to your audience size. And so both of those things uh, combined basically points to audience being the most important goal as a marketer, as a music marketer. So as a
Hmm.
creative person, what I try to enlighten other musicians to believe is think of your audience as the life source for your creativity and your income. And if you can figure out how to incorporate audience growth into your creative practice day to day and your content creation, everything that is, that we're supposed to be doing as an artist, that's in air quotes, by the way.
Hmm.
Uh, if audience growth is the end goal, then you have options. Then you have the beginnings of a business as a musician. So I hope that
Yeah,
clarifies.
no, I love that, man. Um, your audience is the life source for your creativity and income. Um, I definitely resonate with that because in the absence of the audience, what are you really doing? Um, and you highlight a belief shift that, an artist has to make, and it's putting the audience first, it sounds like. How did you stumble on that or develop that mindset or that approach in your experience?
Yeah, honestly, I'm not sure if it was one single thing. Um, I think there's two main life changes that happened in my own life that really clarified this and on multiple fronts with multiple angles. There was well, the first confirmation was with my own list, right? My own email list.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's very important to highlight that, there's a lot of people out there who know that they should create an email list, and that's maybe like very far down on their to-do list. But I almost on accident decided one day I'm actually going to prioritize this email list building concept. Like, I don't know if it's going to pan out, but I'm going to give it a shot, and I'm going to blog. I'm going to put a lead magnet out there in the world. I don't know if this is going to work, but I'm going to try it.
Mm-hmm.
And musicians are often very resistant to this idea, mostly because there's a broken mindset that the music should really stand on its own. I don't really need to, market something that's good, right? If it's good, people will enjoy my music and they'll become fans, right? And you know, if that was true, then we would all be famous, right? And I think it's very important to highlight that intentionality is the difference between audience growth and kind of just hoping your audience will grow. So to continue the story, I intentionally put some effort towards my own list growth. The very first thing I did was I actually repurposed some of the content and some of the thesis that I wrote for my end of college project, right? What is it called? Yeah, like the final
Yeah.
project of my music degree.
Mm-hmm.
So, and what I did is because I wanted to focus on production and composition, I made some virtual instruments. I coded it in the Contact platform made by Native Instruments. And I made a few libraries that, were playable on a MIDI controller, and I thought it was super cool. And it took a long time to figure out. Wrote a paper on it, ended up graduating, so they liked it. And so what I did is I ended up writing blog posts and repurposing a lot of that hard work into new content that was almost like the 2.0 version. And one of my lead magnets was a free download of my instrument. Like,
Mm-hmm.
download it for free. You can play with it. You can use it in your productions. And I didn't really think that I would get thousands of emails from that lead magnet, but I ended up ranking a blog post pretty much on accident. I was by no means an SEO expert at the time, but just kind of, following a few best practices and of course being passionate about the topic.
Mm-hmm.
It's good writing is a great SEO tip, right? So it was well written, and I think it had pretty good page time, in Google Analytics, and that translated into a lot of emails. And so as a musician, that was cool because I figured out that I was building my list with people who were really similar to me, right? We had similar interests. Um, I was a nerd for, virtual instruments, and the people joining my list were also nerds for virtual instruments, and they wanted my
Yeah.
free one, right? And so that was a really huge confirmation and a shift in my mind that now that I had an audience, I had pretty much the most valuable thing that we can have in marketing. I had a reliable communication channel with people who had something in common with me, some kind of common interest or some kind of common goal. And the same is true with a music audience, right? The common goal can be described a few different ways, right? Everyone in your audience wants to either see you succeed or wants to support your creativity. They maybe want to support you financially. There's probably a subsection of your audience that can actually do it or will actually do it. But all of that is true for musicians as well. And so, that was really a huge moment that truly confirmed in my life personally
Yeah.
that, yeah, with an audience that I can nurture and communicate with and be funny with, or share a story or share just what I'm doing in real time, that's true power with a business. And yeah, I think musicians need to be more open to that and not just hope that Spotify will bless them with their algorithm and really making streams the end goal because a stream is great, it's cool, but a stream doesn't help your communication with your fan base. And I still think that fan base communication is more important than a stream.
Yeah, so I like that a lot. I'm on your email list, so I know that you send a lot of emails. Like I think sometimes it's daily. And I've been wondering, how do you keep that up? How much of it do you preload? How much is like in the moment? I know there's always a different promotion going on. Like, how do you manage all your whole email system?
Great question. And I'll give two answers because there is a lot that I've done to get to this point. I care a lot about email, obviously. My email list is the main way that I communicate. Um, and I can't take credit for it all. I've taken courses on email copywriting. I do have a team at the Indie Music Academy that helps me plan. And I do have outside help from copywriters as well. So today in the current iteration of the Indie Music Academy and the way that we communicate, there's multiple people involved. There's a lot of moving parts. Um, and I do get a lot of help now. But I think for the solopreneur, which usually most musicians are starting out doing this solo, all on their own, and they would be wearing all of the hats of planning and scheduling and writing. The the thing that helped me the most, especially when I was doing it solo, was kind of mapping out the whole month and knowing exactly what category of email I'm supposed to be writing. And the funny thing, Omari, is that I actually find it easier to write in real time rather than schedule in advance. And I know that might, be different depending on personality types or creativity types. For some, I'm sure it's easier just to batch out and write 3 or 4 emails at once. In fact, I know a few people who do that. But the way that I was taught, and also what works well for me is really to just get into a state of flow.
Hmm.
And that can either be helped by putting on a soundtrack that I love, or just, finding the same time of day every day, or even, this works for some people, putting on that hoodie that you only wear when you're trying to be a writer and then you take it off when you're doing other things. Whatever the trick is for you, there are triggers that can help you get into a state of flow. And I like to just try to enter into that moment daily where I can knock out an email. It doesn't need to be any set length. And I also don't really worry about typos either. I've sent so many typos to the list, but um, but yeah, that's what I try to do. And then going back to knowing the type of email that I should be sending, I have the month mapped out kind of in general, repeating, cycling, like a weekly plan, basically. So week one, and let me actually just pull this up so I am accurate with my own plan. But yeah, week one, I just try to story tell. I'm not
Mhm.
really focusing on selling, not focusing on anything other than just trying to be personable, maybe sharing some kind of creative mindset or just adding value to the list. And sometimes I'll introduce maybe a theme for the month. And then in week two, that's when I'll start to really plan like, am I going to do some kind of promotion? Am I going to introduce a product or bring back remind the list of some kind of product that I have and want to share with them again? And this is in week two, this is when I'll finally narrow down on maybe some kind of focus or some kind of paradigm shift that I'm trying to just introduce to get ready for week three, which would be more of an intentional promotional week. And that's when I'll do like a big announcement email, like, hey, I want to announce this new product or maybe this old product. And here's an email with the frequently asked questions. And here's an email, going into detail on how this will work for you and if you're the right fit and basically all that sales stuff.
Yeah, yeah.
And then week 4, I call that like the cool down week where basically I can do some kind of, reply email. That's what I call it, where I literally ask them to reply and I'll ask them, hey, what did you enjoy about this product? Or what attracted to you about this product? Or what doesn't attract you? And what do you wish I could make instead? And and basically it's a simple, repeatable content flow, I guess you would call it,
Mm-hmm.
where at least I know what I'm supposed to be doing and everything else, like literally right down to the subject line or the topic of the email. I try to create that in real time and I don't really restrict it too much because I understand from a content creation perspective that almost anything can be related to anything else, right? I can take
Mm-hmm.
a news headline. I can take, another piece of content that I saw that maybe I want to share or at least take a principle from, right? Book titles or even chapter titles from a book I'm reading. Anything can be related to something that I'm currently doing. And maybe that's, a broad stroke generalization, but it's almost like um, finding the thread in what your life is experiencing versus what your audience is experiencing. And there's always some kind of common thread
Mm.
that I feel that I can write about, even if it's just a story of something I've experienced or something that I've read. I know that I can relate that back to music marketing if I'm speaking to the Indie Music Academy audience. Or if you're a musician, you can relate just a random story maybe on stage or in the songwriting room or something random that happened in your day, and you can relate that back to anything really. You can say, "This is why I'm going to be doing this," or "This is a story that I'm going to be telling more in depth on my live stream later this week." So it's just having that pivot uh, helps to relate anything to anything else. And I'm not sure if that's, something that I've just become more comfortable doing, but I,
Mm-hmm.
I feel like a pretty huge amount of freedom knowing that like I can talk about anything that's interesting to me,
Yeah.
and eventually I know that I'll be able to pull in some kind of value to uh, to the reader as well.
Yeah, no, that is an incredibly liberating approach or awareness to know that one, everything is connected to everything else. If you can find what that pivot point is or that point of relatability between you and the audience.
Hmm.
At what point did you realize that you were a teacher, that you were an educator? Like,
Oh man.
was it always there, or did it kind of just dawn on you as you went deeper into your interests and allowed them to synthesize?
Man, that's such a good question. I mean, it's I kind of like joke to myself, and sometimes I'll tell my wife this story, but it's like, how in middle school when they have the kids news station going around, and they'll interview the students, and it's all just for fun, and they'll like
Mm-hmm.
play it on the school TV. I remember in middle school, like they went around the class, asking like, what do you want to be when you grow up? And like when I was, 12 years old, my answer was like, I want to be a teacher. And I don't know if that's because my dad was a teacher. He's a music teacher to this day. Um, but for a while, that dream, that I guess career dream, it really didn't manifest in anything real or intentional, especially in music school, because in music school, I knew I didn't necessarily want to teach lessons, even though I did, because you gotta have budget for books and beer, right? Or whatever it is. And I just in college, I wanted to be more of a composer or a songwriter, and so that teaching dream really didn't manifest until the digital marketing side was
Hmm.
really developed in me. And I just became really passionate about it for some reason. I think it's because I knew it was missing
Mm.
in the musical discussion. I spent 4 years of my life learning music history, music theory, composition, arrangement, all of this really great technical music stuff. But I saw the gap in multiple categories of musicians, not just the ones that are classically trained like me, but every musician needs to know in this digital age, how to craft a message, how to get their message out there on social media, or to build a list, right? How to nurture an audience. And so I think just the passion for the subject of digital marketing really reignited something that's always been in me. I've always had great teachers. And I enjoy learning as well. I'm definitely still a student to this day, and still invest in education for myself all the time. So I think that's just a part of who I am, and yeah, I just love doing it.
Yeah, I mean, that I can attest to that. I'm like, I've always known you to be someone who invests in their own personal education. Who have been some of the key influences for you in the digital marketing realm, that have kind of like, uh you've gotten, a lot from in terms of developing who you are today?
Yeah, that's a great question. There's a few. I'd say number one for sure is Graham Cochran. He has his own personal brand, but he originally is the founder of the Recording Revolution, which was a great YouTube channel, great website uh, that taught musicians how to record music at home, oftentimes in their bedroom with affordable gear, right? And I discovered Graham because in college I wanted to learn more about recording, even more than what I was getting taught in the college classes. And because we did have a studio on campus, but I started buying my own gear, and that's when Graham's YouTube channel really uh, really resonated with me. And so back in college, I was consuming his content, but after graduating, he had pivoted into more of into a business guru, right? And so his new offerings really helped me. And he's since written a book called How to Get Paid for What You Know. Um, and yeah, he's just been a fantastic resource for me. And he's someone I keep going back to again and again because he just has a very balanced approach to online education and digital marketing, in my opinion. Um, Someone else too. I got to shout out Ian Stanley, who was my go-to copywriting coach, because I think I think I've adopted a little bit of his writing style. I've taken so many of his classes, um, and he's he's just a really funny, uh, just a sharp, smart guy. Um, and it's always an interesting time with Ian. But if you can handle his pacing, I think that could be good if you want to dig into a little bit of copywriting training.
Mm. Yeah, it's funny. I'm aware of both Graham and Ian. Ian
Hmm.
on the email side. So it's interesting to hear that because I can definitely make the connection with some of your approach on the marketing side. You know,
Yes.
you talked a little bit about the SEO content being like a key lead generator early on. And what I remember from that was you were going so deep into your interest where to you it might not have been that deep, right? But um, in comparison to what else was out there at the time, there wasn't anything that had gone as deep as you had gone into that particular topic. And so I remember that for myself as being like a verifier of what I like to call blue ocean SEO, right? Where you're going into somewhat of uncharted or less charted content territory. Um, how has SEO played out for you since then?
Yeah, I feel that it's been definitely Blue Ocean has been number one for me. I talked to you pretty in depth about this. I think you're referencing the music royalties blog post that I wrote a few years back now, and I've been constantly updating it. And that was the longest, most in-depth blog post I honestly had ever written. Uh, and it was, I think, a blue ocean topic, not in the sense that if you Googled music royalties, nothing came up. There was definitely a lot of resources, but nobody has ever compiled the topic of music royalties into one ultimate guide. And so that's what I did. And for any musicians listening, or even non-musicians, there are so many different categories of music royalties, from performance royalties to mechanical royalties. Then there's non-interactive streaming royalties. There's all these very, almost to the point of annoyance, different rules and different methods to collecting them. And at the time, if you Googled how to collect royalties, it was always an incomplete guide, what I found. And same thing with even more specific searches. So if you searched how to collect, mechanical royalties, if you somehow knew to search for that term, it would be once again a very simple overview of the subject with maybe not a lot of insight or even actionable steps, right? So what I did basically is I read a couple books, read all of the competing blogs, just to see what was out there, and then I started writing my own guide, just to really make basically the post that I wish that I had, right? The ultimate guide where I I went all in on this actually, man. I made like a an anchored linked table of contents. I numbered everything so that I can get in Google feature snippets, and I really like you said, maybe it was a lot of tips, but I just tried to make the blog post to end all blog posts, and it's still to this day the highest ranking post on the website, or highest trafficked, I should say, post on the website. And it's one that I still update, because music royalties is something that is evolving and changing. So I just did my 2024 update on the blog to reflect the recent industry changes. But man, I think you're right in your assessment that like I really was passionate about just writing it in a way where not only would it be a great user experience, right? I was pretty much solving the problem of nobody having this guide in its entirety. But
Yeah.
I really wanted it to be something that Google would really chew up and rank highly in a bunch of different searches. And that seemed to be, thankfully, I mean, I don't claim to be an expert at all, but thankfully that's what happened, and it's ranking pretty good.
I think it's always helpful to remember that with SEO, you're problem solving the fact that someone can't find something. That's the
Mhm.
that's the whole game. Is like the big problem is someone is looking for something out there, and either it's not well optimized to be found, or it doesn't exist, or it's out of date, or
Mhm.
maybe it's really good and maybe it needs to be put somewhere else where it could be found.
Mhm.
So that's how I always kind of think about it. So I'm glad that you had that experience.
Yeah.
I know you've had experience with music licensing, and a friend of mine um, who I started my entrepreneurial journey with about a decade ago, he came into it with a music licensing background, and he would always emphasize the licensing business model to me or with me as it pertains to other kinds of intellectual property. And I was reflecting on that recently as it relates to people creating digital products. And I think what I've learned, and even this has been my experience with digital products, is the licensing mindset works really well because what you're essentially the thought process you're working through is who else would want the rights to use what I've just created? Who else would benefit from using what I've just created? And then how can I grant them a license to use it? So, the plugins at sqsbthemes.com, you can get the personal license or the business license. So essentially, that's the thought process that kind of birthed my digital product experience. I know you have licensing experience as well. So how has that played into your online business?
Yeah. So first of all, I really admire your business, Amari. The way that you set that up is really incredible. You know, the thing with music licensing for me is that I've always been personally in my creative creative journey, I've always personally been in a very narrow subsection of music licensing where everything that I've ever written or composed has been commissioned by either a music supervisor or a director. So in my own personal experience, I've not gone the route of, creating a massive library of audio, or doing music bed or doing any of the traditional music licensing with a publisher. So just to
Hmm.
be upfront about that, but that doesn't mean one is better than the other. In fact, the commissioned works that I've done actually went on to win me 2 Emmys. So that I guess is still legitimate, right? But for me, music licensing is really just tapping into a bigger industry, the filmmaking industry, right? As a musician, right? So we think about the music industry usually in terms of Spotify streams, the shows that I can play or perform at, maybe getting signed to a record label, and that's all one big bubble over here to the side. And then right next door is the film industry, and there's not a lot of overlap. I personally consider it to be a completely different career path, even though an artist can do both, and many artists do both. But yeah, for me, it was really about networking with the directors and networking with the music supervisors and actually creating something for them that I knew that they would want because they literally specified that.
Hmm.
So tying that back into digital products and digital marketing, that principle is still true, where almost everything I make as a course creator, as a content creator, has already been specified by my audience, right? So the courses, the table of contents for the courses, I literally ask them like, what would you love for me to create for you? I do this through reply emails, like I mentioned before, where I literally send out an email and say, hey, reply to this email with your thoughts. Sometimes the question is specific, sometimes it's broad. And also, my main channel of content is YouTube. I like uploading, video guides talking about music marketing and royalties. And so, on the YouTube channel, which is titled Indie Music Academy, I will put a survey out on YouTube, and it can be about anything. But I'm really researching, uh, topics so I know that they are exactly what my audience need, right? So whatever the audience responds to, whatever they raise their hand for and say, I need this, that's what I respond to, much in the way that I was commissioned to write a very specific piece of music. I see it in a very similar process where I owe it to my audience to listen to them, to be intentional to them, and to try and create exactly what they're already asking for.
I see that as like a covenant that you make with your audience.
Mhm.
And I've broken that covenant many times, right? So like
So have I, for
even
sure.
even though I know and I've practiced and have reaped the benefits, I sometimes I still fall back to or I have fallen back to states where, oh, I just want to figure it out myself and surprise you, surprise
Mhm.
the audience with something they never said they wanted. And kind of take that risk. I think it's a very risky way to go about things. Whereas the better approach, in my opinion, is always in like I'm with you, like we're in conversation where there's a con, means with, right? So like in a commission, you're on a mission with someone, right? So they've paid for you to collect together, accomplish something. And without that togetherness with the audience, you miss out on all of that. So um that's been like a reoccurring lesson for me to remember, is that I can't leave that, you can't leave from among the audience. You got to stay among them in order to really serve them in the way that they need to be served. I don't know if I lost you or we're just going to meditate on that last one.
Oh man, I'm just meditating on that. It's so profound.
Yeah. Um, bring me into your, and to wrap it up, bring me a little bit into your spiritual practice and how that has influenced your business, because lately I've been reflecting on my own spiritual journey and experience, and what I've found is that um, once upon a time I didn't realize how embedded or synchronous everything was, but now I'm more in tune with the fact that uh, everything that I ever pursued spiritually has business and material benefits as well, that forces me, or not forces me, but compels me now um to not want to break certain covenants.
Mhm. Absolutely. Yeah, dude, this is such a good topic. It's something that I actually want to uh, invest time in writing and in sharing. And there's still a few things I'm figuring out for myself, admittedly, because I think it's a journey that, well, it's a lifelong journey, you know.
Mhm.
And but yeah, I so uh, to start from the beginning, I'm a practicing Christian. Um, you know, I man, when it comes to creativity, I feel that everything just flows from the ultimate creator, right? The creator that created everything. And it's kind of a funny thing that when you take a look at, let's call it accomplishments, or, a business that's quote successful or whatever it is, in reality, I just feel that almost everything has just been given to me because I'm not really that smart. Like I work hard, but really it truly feels like an orchestration that's 100% outside of my control, right? The people that I meet, the friendships that are created, like meeting you, Amari, and just the learning and the inspirations, and even what I, for some reason, wake up and decide to be interested in one day. Like, where does that all come from? Like, where do your
Mhm.
interests come from, right? And it's got to be flowing from the great creator, right?
Mhm.
And and so with that perspective, like you said, it's a covenant because I feel that this audience that I have, this business that I have, I feel that, I'm not smart enough to construct this on my own. It almost feels that I've been given a stewardship to take care of uh, the people that I'm connected with, to
Hmm.
give to them in an extremely generous way to improve their lives and to at least encourage them. And yeah, that's been something that um, I just can't take credit for everything because I truly feel that I'm called into this position, and that it's almost like a responsibility has been presented, and I now need to rise up to that. And
Hmm.
that's how I view the audience nurture. Um, and yeah, I think your word covenant is the perfect word because there's a responsibility involved, right? And if a covenant is broken, there's a responsible party, right? That should be to blame. And so, yeah, it's such a good question though, because I feel that, any audience growth, any successful product launch, like yes, it comes from showing up and from doing the work of planning and educating, but there truly is a just the power behind everything that is it seems a little bit too orchestrated to be just random chance.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
For sure. Um, you and to wrap it up, you talked a lot about flow, how you get in your state of flow, the fact that your audience is both a life source for creativity and income. And I think you kind of pull it all together here where it's like yes, there's a communion with the audience that is necessary as a creative, as a creator. And without that, in the absence of that communion with the audience, then you are unable to respond. You no longer have the ability to respond to their needs.
Mm,
Um, but when you're in communion, you're better able to recognize, identify, uh, and then, like you say, rise to the occasion and respond according to your creativity. And I love all of that because I'm moving in a direction where it's like, wow, this is so simple, right? It's not easy,
yeah.
but it is simple, and the results do speak for themselves. And the part that I've found for myself lately is if I don't do this podcast, or if I don't put myself in a situation where I have to engage with people, in real time according to what they need, then I feel off. Like I feel like I'm not doing what I'm supposed to be doing.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why I'm doing what I'm supposed to be doing now. Um, Ryan, it's been great talking to you. Is there anything that you would like to leave with our audience today on the topic of audience, knowing that you were once in this audience?
Absolutely. Yeah. Gosh, just always keep learning. Have your mind wide open. Um, and that's I think that's the character trait of my younger self that has looking back, in hindsight, that has helped me the most. I don't ever want to stop learning, and I consider myself a student for life. And so I think that no matter what it is, even if it's uncomfortable stretching into new topics that you're tempted to feel, oh, maybe someone else should do that for me. Maybe someone else should do the SEO optimization or whatever it is. Because believe me, I'm tempted all the time to. I give myself a million excuses not to learn, but every time that I choose to learn and invest in myself, it's always been worthwhile. And so I think that's probably my greatest life lesson so far.
Mm.
Uh, and yeah, I think it's sound and probably a great way to end the podcast episode today.
Thanks, Ryan.